folks. Welcome back into another edition of the Calling It How I See It Sports podcast. I'm your host, Blake Terrance, here with you, here to talk a little Chiefs on this Royals off day. We've got to get back into Royal spaces probably after the All-Star break. They're on a bit of a hot streak, but Chiefs training camp just can't get here fast enough still. We're about 3 weeks out from it, and no matter how the Royals are doing with the Chiefs and the way they are, we're going to be foaming at the mouth for it every time it gets to this time of year. And, it's a little unfair to the Royals sometimes because, one team just kind of takes up all the oxygen, but such is life when you've got a mega team that's won 2 of the last 3 and 4 of the last 6 Super Bowls it is. So really excited to be joined by Joshua Briscoe. You heard him with me a few weeks ago, almost probably a little over a month ago now, as we talked some of the early offseason stuff. But now let's talk about some of the more true football angles as we get closer and closer to training camp. Joshua, of course, is the host of Only Weird Games with Nate Taylor and Seth Kaiser over on KC Sports Network. Briscoe, how you doing tonight, man?
Doing fantastic, and I don't mean to correct you this early in the show, but I don't know actually if you got the news or not, because it's all happened quite recently. But I host Only Weird Games with myself, Seth Kaiser, and Nate Taylor of ESPN.
Oh,
As
that's
he
right. I
announced
did see that. That's my mistake.
moving to the mothership. It's okay. It's an understandable mistake. I think he has legally changed his name to either ESPN's Nate Taylor or Nate Taylor of ESPN. I'm not sure if he's got that, on his passport yet or not. But honestly, man, I'm fantastic in large part because I am so tickled for Nate. I am so excited that is out now, and it's just honestly, it's been a very, very good day for that
Yeah,
more than any other reason.
I had seen that, and honestly, it's word of mouth memory. It's like muscle
Yes.
memory, I guess, brain memory. So yeah, that's my mistake. But really big shout out to him. And when are you joining him over there, Briscoe? When's that
Yeah,
happening?
yeah, I'm not gonna hold my breath on that. I think there's gonna be some exciting stuff for all of us this football season. But yeah, Nate taking over and stepping into to
Yeah,
Adam
makes a lot of
Teicher's vacated
sense.
could not be a better passing of the baton. Both of those guys are just absolutely the best. Both as people and at what they do. So yeah,
Well,
I'm
let's jump
tickled.
right in here, man, and let's start with a topic that feels like it's the right one to start with because it's undeniably the elephant in the room, and yet I feel like a bit of a broken record because I've talked about this with pretty much everybody I've had to have Chiefs offseason talk, but nothing keeps on happening, and like I said, about 3 weeks out from training camp. So let's start about talking about Rashee Rice because if he's available for this whole season, he, of course, is the focal point of the Chiefs offense. Now, we've got 2 things, of course, hanging over this. We've got the eventual, I think, suspension for his terrible decision making last offseason. And of course, he is recovering from a pretty significant knee injury that wiped out his season in week 4. So if he is healthy, are we pretty much officially out of time for it to happen in 2025? Because it seems like that's the way that the legal system tries to work. I don't want to say that that it just works around people's schedules because that's not how the law and accountability is supposed to work, but it doesn't fight the inevitable. And I don't think they're going to be trying to have a trial and litigate stuff for a NFL player during the NFL season. That tends to be the precedent of the legal system. Are we out of time for it to happen this year again?
It sure seems like it, man. And the thing that always has me just holding back 10% of hesitance is that the NFL can operate independently of the legal
Oh,
system.
yeah.
We've seen that
And that's
happen.
why, yeah.
But it sounds like from every bit of reporting we've got on Rice in particular, sounds like the NFL wants to wait for the legal system to pan out. And a hat tip to the other 33% of Only Weird Games. Seth, from his lawyerly seat, has continued
Mm-hmm.
to be a little bit baffled that we don't even really have criminal charges publicly. There was a little bit of a misreport on that last week, or maybe earlier this week, where there's a civil suit, and we obviously we have some evidence of what happened back last spring. But if the NFL is waiting for the legal system, we don't even have a date for, and again, criminal charges for Rashee Rice, or what those would even be. At this point, it seems like the NFL is playing the waiting game, which I think is probably for the best. Again, the NFL is kind of played by different rules there with different circumstances, which makes sense. But I think at this point, the other side that you mentioned, he's physically, it seems like, in really good place right now, which
Yeah.
I was assuming for the bulk of this offseason. Hey, you're not going to have Rashee Rice for one reason or another for the first 4 to 6 weeks of the season. That was kind of my no
I
intel, just
guess
kind of
that's the silver
assumption
lining
baseline.
of the injury happening as early as it did last year,
Right, is
is
that
that
he's
it's given
back and
him
looking healthy
time.
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think all the time about, and it wasn't just the ACL, it was different knee stuff for Rice. But I
Right.
think a lot about one Thornhill, and I think it was because I was just out there at training camp that
This was
year
like
and
the worst
asking
possible
questions and stuff.
timing.
Correct. And Charles Amina, who had
Same
him beat
deal.
by a
Yeah.
few
Yep.
weeks later. But I remember talking to Thornhill out there, and that first season back, saying, "Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm going to be out there, and I'm working back, and it's all good." Then the next training camp, the year after, and he played pretty quick after the ACL, all things considered. But it was the next year where he was like, "Yeah, I wasn't 100% last year. I can tell that now." Sometimes the players just need to say, "I'm 100%." Sometimes they need to believe they're 100%. So there's always a little hesitance for me that I want to make sure we give players, and this is going to come up later because I know we're going to eventually get to a guy who is also in a similar category. I always want to give players as much benefit of the doubt in terms of like injury recovery and things like that in the way we talk about him. Because otherwise, a guy gets hurt, you see 2 games of him, and you go, "Oh, he stinks. He's never going to be that guy again." And really, we just don't know. It's just too early to make that call. Everything has been good news for Rashee Rice throughout this offseason. Yeah, right now, I'm assuming he's going to be playing week 1 in Brazil, and that's pretty
And
amazing.
so now that you mentioned that, it kind of that report that mishap of reporting had kind of slipped my mind. Let's talk about that for just a second. Is there like, because I had this impression that he had that we had some charges come down pretty quickly, like last year, like within a month or two after the incident, that he had faced like 8 charges, that like was like multiple of like causing reckless driving causing significant bodily harm or whatever, and then a couple other more minor ones. And so apparently like those are all civil issues. Then is that what we've kind of come to learn, is that he's still yet to be actually criminally charged?
I think I might be nobody aggregate or write anything about off of what I'm about to say because I am
Yeah,
not
yeah.
100% sure, which is crazy. I believe they were facing some counts of those charges, he and the other driver at the time.
Hmm.
And then later there were several civil
From
suits.
the
We've seen that started rolling
victims,
from the
yeah.
victims, right? So in terms of the actual federal criminal charges, there was something like 8 counts or 6 counts or something. I'm trying to pull it up and see if I can get any of it exactly right. But yeah, the grand message here, to paraphrase a Seth paraphrase, is that we don't. There is no date set for him to face those charges, and I'm not 100% sure we have like actual official in the ink charges. Certainly nothing since those initial ones that you're remembering, which creates a lot of time, a lot of space since that happened, which is
Yeah,
kind of
and I mean,
bonkers.
to your point, um, I that's exactly why I tried to talk about this from the, are we out of time because of the slow pace of the legal system? Because
Right.
I mean, we've seen the NFL punish players under their own personal conduct policy who never act, like Zeke Elliott is a good example.
Mm-hmm.
He
Mm-hmm.
never actually faced legal charges at all from his incidents, but
Right.
he was still suspended. So like, is that maybe one more wrinkle we should add to this story, that like maybe the legal system is out of time, but that the NFL could still drop a bomb in August?
I think that is absolutely true. And I would still, based on some of the reporting, and I think it may have been a Florio report a little bit back, on the NFL saying they wanted to, in this case, wait for the legal system to play out. And I think a lot of times the type of alleged activity or whatever can impact how quickly the NFL feels pressure to move. And I mean, if they wanted to, they could have done something last
Last year.
year
Yeah.
and have said, "Hey, look, we saw this on tape, and these are the accusations, and
Yeah,
here's
it's
what
not
we've got.
exactly a
So we're gonna
mystery,
whatever.
is
We're gonna
it? What
Right,
happened? Like,
that's kind of the part of it for me that has me a little bit like curious on how the NFL got to that point. But I also think the NFL, and there's a new CBA coming up before too long. I think the NFL probably feels a little bit of a desire to get a little bit more consistent in how they handle some of these things. And the easiest thing from their perspective is wait for the law to tell us what it's going to be, and then we'll take it from there. And obviously, teams have the ability to suspend players on their own if they want. I'm not insinuating the Chiefs will or should with Rice. Just in general, kind of thinking about
Yeah.
like Justin Ross had an in-season suspension. So again, it is a kind of a bizarre circumstance, and I do think, to your kind of original question, I think at this point we're probably going to see him in week 1 unless the NFL kind of goes back on some
Yeah.
of the stuff that's been reported so
All right,
far.
let's move on from that and talk about probably the other biggest elephant in the room at the moment, given that next week, in fact, I believe, yeah, because today's the 10th. So that would be next, let's see, Tuesday is the franchise tag deadline, the deadline
Yeah.
to sign franchise tag players to long-term deals. And, I mean, I monitor the news wires and X and whatever else as much as anybody else. And unless I've just drastically missed something, which please tell me if I have, it seems like there's just about as much of nothing on Trey Smith as there has been on the Rashee Rice suspension situation. Now, I kind of have a theory on this. I think that could be either a really bad sign or it could mean that it's just a formality and maybe they're playing a bit of chicken but it's going to get done and they're so confident in that there's just no need to have leaks. And because of course, people always are like, well, why haven't we heard anything? Why hasn't some leak dropped, or why hasn't somebody said something to whoever, to Adam Schefter or whatever? And it's like, well, think about the strategy is what I say behind that, because when that stuff happens, it doesn't happen like on accident because like somebody got too loose over beers and said something like that is deliberate. When guys like Schefter and Rappaport get leaks like that, it's like negotiations are hitting a snag, or like the Chiefs and Trey Smith are at odds. If we had heard that, that is deliberate. It's one of the two sides trying to pull a lever in the negotiating route. So the fact that nothing like that is happening, I feel like either tells me they're just like they've resigned themselves to like, well, we did not get a deal done. He's playing on the tag, so we're not even going to do drama. Or it's like, well, it's going to come down to the last minute because that's how this works, but we're going to get it done, so there's no need for drama. Where are you at on that? Do you think am I on the right track, or do you think there's still is it still very fluid and it's just like we're just not going to know until it either happens or doesn't?
I think you're on the right track. I think the thing about like when there are and aren't leaks, I think is a very salient point, and I'll just add to that for anybody listening who's thinking like, okay, so what, like, how does that sausage get made? And there's levels to all of it, but when possible, when you see a report like that or a leak like that, ask yourself, who does this benefit? Who does, if this information is now public, who from
Yeah,
the either side of this story or whatever, who benefits from the
exactly.
world
It's
knowing this
Schefter
info?
did not become omnipotent. There
Correct.
was a reason he heard what he heard.
He didn't bug the houses of 32 NFL general managers and 100 agents. Like, this is because it's, hey, this is what we want to put out there right now and all of that. So with all of that being said, I think you're absolutely right. You're absolutely on the right track. I think the reason we haven't heard anything about it is because there's a healthy relationship there and that there's optimism the deal's getting done. And I'm not reporting that. I don't know that any more than you do, but the feel that I have is that on a lot of levels and with a lot of the ways that both the Chiefs and to a lesser extent Trey Smith have kind of moved throughout this offseason, I'd be really, really surprised if they got down to the wire and weren't able to get it done. The interesting part to me, with that being said, is a question that I think I asked Nate on the show a episode or two ago, which was, okay, so I understand this is still happening, and I understand the relationship's still good. I'm still absolutely betting on this deal getting done. My question is, who benefits from this negotiation continuing? What is being discussed right now?
Hmm.
And I think what it most likely is, and Nate talked about this on Weird Games, is that there's an element of like we're either talking about an extra year or a higher APY, and then when does Trey Smith want to try to hit free agency again? What are the Chiefs comfortable guaranteeing? Like, it's not just, do you want to play for the Chiefs for the next 4 years and we're going to pay you about $24 million per year? there are some of those details that I'm guessing are the things being hung up on right now. I have a really, really, really hard time imagining, again, getting to the end of the wire and then both sides walk away from the table. I don't know who's more likely to kind of bend in the negotiation or whatever. But when the Chiefs traded Joe Tooney away, I think they lost a lot of the like plausible leverage they might have had. Because if Tooney was still on the team and hadn't signed an extension, I think you could say, hey man, we're either gonna play out this year with you at right guard, and we'll extend Tooney and have some stability there, or we'll get you locked up, and then we'll move on from Tooney after this season. The fact that Kingsley Suamataia is probably the number 2 guard on this team right now means to me they have planned around having Trey Smith be a part of this line. It's going to be a lot of money. It's going to be a massive contract for a guard, but I think that's the plan. And I just find it very, very unlikely. Not even like this is not a hometown discount thing or anything like that. I find it very unlikely that Trey Smith would say, I'm going to take an extra $1 million a year, or I'm going to take a little bit of guarantees here or there, and then go play in Carolina. Or even like where he went to college back in Tennessee. They could use him, but he's doing a State Farm commercial with Patrick Mahomes here. Like
Yeah.
this, both in terms of winning and where he is settled in and the role that he can have. If he's here for a decade in front of Patrick Mahomes, I'm not trying to put this career on him, but he might be Will Shields in 10 or 15 years in Kansas City, right? I'm not the player there is a deeply unfair comparison because one of the all-time greats. Like in terms of like, oh yeah, this was an iconic O lineman in this golden age of Chiefs football. I think that's in front of Trey Smith, and I think that's something that the Chiefs, if the Chiefs are listening, they got to play that clip for him and say, hey man, you got like legacy potential here. And obviously he's going to make a lot of money on that deal. So I think it gets done before the deadline. And I think everyone's going to be pretty happy
Yeah.
with how it shakes
Now
out.
we
That's my
have
guess.
seen not a perfect apples to apples comparison because it was a guy they traded for. It wasn't their guy, but we have sort of seen this stalemate before
Mm-hmm.
with Orlando Brown,
Mm-hmm.
and we had for all the same reasons you just mentioned. We had a pretty high degree of certainty that something was going to get done, and maybe even more so in some ways because it was probably the most. I know that now there's the new wisdom says that tackles are equally important now, that left isn't so much an outlier, but still arguably the most important position on the offensive line, and it didn't happen. If like again, I think the relationship, like you said, is a healthier one, especially again when you factor in other factors that make this not a perfect comparison, like Orlando Brown's agent situation was weird at the time.
Yes, it was. That's what I was
But
going to mention. Yes.
if let's say it doesn't happen, and let's say he plays on the franchise tag, how does that I guess retrospectively change your perspective on the whole thing? Does that seem like a fumble of the ball for you? Do you think it's just, or could it be that it's wise that you carry the heavy cap hit because you couldn't get on the same page, you weren't comfortable with the guaranteed or the whatever that he was asking for? Maybe you try again next year. Not that it's going to get any cheaper. I don't know, but like I feel like that's the push pull there. If it doesn't happen, there's going to be a good amount of people saying like, well, what was this all for then? We traded Joe Tooney, who's probably even a little better, at least, this year. Not that
Right
he's
now.
much
Yep.
older, but
Yep.
we traded him to spend even more money on Trey Smith and not lock him up. But then there's going to be the other people that are going to be like the eternal trust in Brett Veach, which is not a bad idea. But it's like, well, hey, clearly he wasn't comfortable with the other option, with the deal that Trey Smith wanted. How would it change your perspective on this offseason and that dynamic if they don't get it done?
At bare minimum, it would make me believe that the Chiefs had pivoted to plan B. Because I just really, really, really don't believe that trading Joe Tooney and then having Trey Smith play under the tag, I don't believe that was plan A. The
Sure.
the upside for me is that, and again, I've been tiptoeing around this because I'm not like super convicted about it. I don't have a super hot take. I think the Chiefs made like a terrible misstep this offseason with the guard shuffle, but I may have personally done it differently. And I don't know. You mentioned like with Joe Tooney. Joe Tooney is going to be, I think, a better guard, or at least a better pass protector this season for Patrick Mahomes than Trey Smith will be. But they're not betting on that. They're betting on the next 4 or 5 years.
Right.
I also, though, I liked that Joe Tooney extension for the Bears pretty well. Like I
Yeah.
felt like that
Yeah.
was a very reasonable deal to keep him around, even going into his mid 30s there. If if Trey Smith plays out the franchise tag, I think it means that the Chiefs were really uncomfortable with where the negotiations got. And again, I'm expecting they do get the negotiations figured out. But I think if he plays out under the tag, again, it's on some level, like maybe a little bit kind of Orlando Brown thing is a good comp. Maybe you say, hey, you know what? Credit to the team for walking away instead of bending on their offer for a player that they didn't think was one of the 3 or 4 most important players on the team. But Trey Smith, if they do extend him, he's going to be paid like one of the 5 most important players on the team. And, positional value and all that comes around, but he's a guard, which is valuable. Costs more to get 2 guards than 1 center. So Trey Smith is a little more valuable of an asset, I guess, than Creed, even though Creed Humphrey is a better player, humbly stating that. But yeah, I'd be surprised, certainly. I don't think it would be an automatic disaster, but it would certainly then have the Chiefs probably spending a little bit of money in free agency on a guard next year or drafting one pretty highly, which is something that they could absolutely do. They've done that before. But Orlando Brown Jr. is the funny one because he would have been the best. He right now he's the best left tackle that's played in front of Patrick Mahomes.
I was going to say,
At least
I hesitated because the first 2 years of Eric, and then 2020, Fisher got hurt late, kind of like in the Charles Omenihu timeline. They're probably, I feel like, I don't want to get into a semantics debate, but it is a fun topic. Yeah. I feel like those guys are like, it's like, whenever people try to have a debate of like who's better, whether it's like something at the pinnacle like MJ versus LeBron or like something more down on the level we're talking about right now, I feel like sometimes we lose sight of, hey, you know what? They're actually pretty much the same caliber of player. They just get there in polar opposite ways.
Right.
What do you like? Is that a hill you'll stand on, or do you think it's pretty much a wash there of Fisher versus Brown? Because it's an interesting conversation because clearly the left tackle situation has, the one thing we can say is it's followed a steady downward trajectory from Orlando Brown. Like Donovan Smith was worse, and then last year was a complete disaster. So I'm curious though what your thoughts are on that whole thing.
The part that I'll stand on with conviction is that Orlando Brown Jr. has not gotten enough credit for the player he was here. And I think a lot of people are out on him because of how that contract situation went. And like you mentioned, there were a lot of kind of weird things there. And ultimately, he ended up signing a deal with the Bengals that I think the Chiefs had already offered him. And it ended up being kind of a, here's what I think I'm worth kind of thing. And then ends up in Cincinnati, all that. For Brown and Fisher, no, I don't think I would go to the mat on that one either way. There might be a right answer there. I haven't really thought about them head to head. I think a lot of the left tackle discourse has been about since the Fisher Schwartz departure.
Yeah.
Because obviously Mitchell Schwartz was an absolute animal. The technician that he was will never be quite met in my book. But I think in the post Eric Fisher world, I do want to draw the line that Orlando Brown Jr. deserves more credit. I think in general, your like overall take there, I'm absolutely with, and it applies in so many places, man. Because the other way you could view that, I think, is the way we evaluate players is perhaps obviously impacted by how they got there. As you said, Eric Fisher is the funniest one possible because for years he was the devil. I mean, he was a number 1 overall who didn't immediately save your busted franchise. It was
the way he came in.
Absolutely. It was deeply frustrating to Chiefs fans. I'm sure it was deeply frustrating to Eric Fisher. And then by the end, he develops, believe it or not, yes, young players develop over time sometimes. He develops into a very good left tackle, and he ends up playing in some really important games and blocking for the definitive quarterback of this generation. And now you look back on Eric Fisher in a much brighter light than you would have before. And then Orlando Brown Jr. comes in and plays, let's say, about the same level of football, but he got in as a mercenary. He wasn't around for very long, and then he went out in a weird contract dispute kind of thing, and then signed with the Bengals. And it was, that guy was never any good anyway. No, that's not true. He was, but it felt different to you throughout the process. And again, that happens all the time. 1st round draft picks versus 7th round draft picks, free agents versus the homegrown guys. And that's always, in my opinion, at least, that's always impacting the way we view and evaluate players. And I think we need to try to, if not eliminate that, we need to be able to identify that as often as possible.
Well, that is a perfect segue into our next topic because I want to talk about the left side of the offensive line because
me too.
like I get it because last year was pretty bad. And I've heard it like when I say I've talked about this before. When I say that I feel a sense of like something that bothers me, I guess I don't know whether I call it like complacency or maybe even like a little bit of like denialism that like when something is already like the parallel I like to draw with this is that like there were probably more red flags about the Royals offense coming into the year than
Hmm.
where we really gave credit to, but it was already iffy and we already knew that. So we
Right.
probably didn't want to talk about the possibility that it could get worse.
Right.
And, you know, I've even heard like people who would be like, damn near the top of the Kansas City sports talk, in terms of like the spectrums of opinions to be respected, like Sam McDowell and, Soren Petra, who I used to work for, you and I used to work with him. And there tends to be this like, well, thank God they bottomed out last year. Like, it may or may not work out, and I'm just like, I don't know, because you went from giving the rookie Kingsley Somatia the left tackle job and that bombing to now your hope is either another rookie who, yes, is more highly regarded and stuff, but is also in the same boat there, or a guy who really, frankly, has barely any more experience than a rookie. He's
Right.
not, but in terms of his NFL reps, he's closer to a rookie than, a veteran. So, uh, and then of course, I always say Joe Tooney is, maybe as you talk about Orlando Brown maybe getting a bit of a raw deal, and it's like people you throw the baby out with the bathwater there.
Yeah.
Joe Tooney is like another guy that was just so underappreciated because, he was like what I call a tourniquet solution at left tackle. He's not even plan A, or he's not plan A. He's not even really plan B, but he's the guy like if you get a real nasty injury and, maybe like you hit an artery or something and you're in such bad shape, who knows if you'll even make it to the hospital. But hey, you know what? The guy who truly saves your life, I'm doing air quotes in that
Uh-huh.
situation, like Joe Tooney's not the badass vascular surgeon. He's not even really an emergency medicine doctor. I've been watching The Pit, if you can't tell.
Ah,
He is that, but
excellent.
he is that badass paramedic who's cool under pressure, who at least knows how to apply a tourniquet so you can
Yeah.
get to the hospital. And you don't even have that anymore. And of course, that's at left tackle. At left guard, he's one of the best pass protectors in the league. And now you're moving Kingsley Sumatia almost certainly, unless it's Mike Caliendo, who was not good at left guard. Um, unless now you're moving him from to another position and basically again just saying, hey, you're the guy. Like, please be good. And I just ran through what's going on at left tackle. So I feel like because of how bad left tackle was last year, there's this like we want to say like, well, at least that was rock bottom. But I think the ceiling, let's be clear, I'm not doom and gloom on this. I think the ceiling of this left side of the O line is much, much higher than it was last year. But I don't think we've seen the floor, because the floor of offensive line play in the NFL is, I mean, it can completely destroy any offense if it's bad enough. And at least last year it was held together, even if it was by duct tape. Where are you at on this? Do you feel like there's some complacency and denialism here?
First of all, the tourniquet analogy is so good that I just need you to know that it's incredible. That is
I appreciate it.
brilliant, brilliant analogy building, and I love it. And if I steal it, I will credit you. But that one I think is
Appreciate it.
going to stick in my head. That Joe Tooney was a tourniquet option, and I will add and say that by the time the Super Bowl came around, Joe Tooney wasn't even able to save the limb. Like it was, you lost your
No, yeah.
leg, but you kept your life, and that's
Yeah,
important.
Mahomes is still in one
And
piece.
right, right.
So like,
There were other problems at that point with the patient, and we all saw that one, and
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's tell you what, the Super Bowl is a similar reason that I don't watch a lot of the medical dramas. I don't need to see anything that grisly in my day-to-day life. I will not be
yeah.
rewatching the Super Bowl sooner than I have to. But anyway, you also remember Tooney was what I mean. He might have been Plan B because it was Kingsley, it was Wanye Morris, it was DJ
Yeah,
Humphries, and it
forgot
was like,
about
all
that one.
right,
Oh yeah.
that's an easy one to forget because his time was short, and it honestly, man, it's one of my what ifs of that postseason. Like, man, I don't know that he was physically able to go. I don't think it was necessarily just a coaching choice, but man, I do wonder if it would have been any different to keep Tooney at the position where he it was as a future Hall of Famer, in my opinion.
Right.
But I digress. I think you are flagging good stuff there. I think the idea of like, hey, Are we sure that different is better in this circumstance? Because I think you're absolutely right. And this is happening in 31 or 32 NFL front offices and in however many markets. We got a couple duplicates, but it's happening across the country. It's happening around the league right now where you say, well, here's what we did this offseason. Here's who we were last season. And here's what we got. Okay, well, what do we need to win the Super Bowl? Well, we've fixed this, we've addressed this, and then we need these three gambles to pay off. If they all hit, we're a Super Bowl contender. If two of them hit, we're a division winner. If one of them hits, we're a wild card bubble team. And if none of them hit, we're last year's Bengals.
Toast.
You know, that like that,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
it was really in a position like that of, oh, well, upside is Super Bowl, downside is team falls apart, you miss the playoffs. So I really genuinely really like that way of looking at it. With that being said, and with healthy skepticism, I think I just have to keep giving the Chiefs credit, and they had to double dip this way, but the order of operations was good. The process was good. I have to give them credit for basically, after last year, having maybe one NFL caliber tackle on the roster being Jawan Taylor, and I know that opinions vary on him, understandably so.
Mhm.
I think now they probably have three, and maybe they only have two. Maybe Josh Simmons isn't ready, and you rely on Jalen Moore, or maybe Jalen Moore isn't the guy that you saw standing in for Trent Williams, and you see if Josh Simmons is ready for that moment. Obviously, the guys who were Plan A and Plan B at tackle last year are still on the roster. I don't think Kingsley is in the mix there at left tackle at all, but ultimately, you are only given so many options and so many ways you can address the holes in your team throughout an offseason, and you can only address so many of them. I think what the Chiefs did in terms of giving Jalen Moore a legit like 2-year deal where he's either the stopgap protecting Patrick Mahomes on kind of a 2-year tryout, or maybe something happens crazy in the draft, and then you get to the draft and it does, and you get Josh Simmons out at 31, but at 32, and you have this guy who has the higher ceiling. Well, then another bet that I wasn't making, but that has already cashed for the Chiefs. Maybe Josh Simmons is ahead of schedule with his knee, which he appears to
Yep.
be. So I am buying the positive spin. I am buying the optimism. I do think the left tackle position is going to at least be competent this year and has a
I
chance to be
agree. Yep.
really
Yeah.
exciting. But you're right that you can't just always assume that it's all up from here, because that's simply not how sports works. It's an easy trap to fall into. But with that being said, I am cannonballing into that trap because
Don't really
I'm
have
pretty
any other
excited
choice.
about Josh
Well, we
Simmons.
don't, do we?
No, no. I mean, your choice is to just be kind of grouchy in July, and I don't need
Yeah,
to
yeah.
live that life. I think again, all I think I could do reasonably would be to criticize the process before any of these guys put pads on. And I really like the left tackle process. I think the Kingsley left guard thing might actually be the one that like deserves a little bit more of an
Oh, yeah.
evaluation, because he had a pretty good day against the Broncos in week 18, but they didn't
Mhm.
play a lot of snaps, and
Right.
obviously he was playing with the B team. You got Zach Allen for a bunch of that game though, and that's certainly something. But his physical tools at guard seem really good. Like him
Oh,
as an
yeah.
athlete could be a weapon at left guard. But also what you could have going into week one, you could have week one in Brazil, left tackle, rookie Josh Simmons making his NFL debut. And next to him, second year player, first time guard, Kingsley Suamataia, making his debut at left guard. That like you are playing with a little bit of fire there, even if you're really confident in Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey in the middle, and then somewhat confident in Juwan Taylor. You also mentioned just like the state of O-line play around the NFL. That's why it's so difficult to build a good offensive line. You got to get 5 pieces together. They all have to be relatively good in their own right. They all have to mesh together, and then your quarterback has to do a good job behind them. It is messy and complicated and hard to evaluate, and it's why this is, in my opinion, the best sport in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Which situation would you say uh, do you feel more comfortable with? Like, do you feel more comfortable betting on the upside and the having two solutions at left tackle, or do you feel more comfortable with like Kingsley Somatia moving to a quote unquote easier position?
I'm sorry, say that in terms of
Like, which
run that
one
by me
is,
again.
are you more concerned about left tackle still, or are we more concerned that Kingsley
Gotcha.
Somatia is basically being given a position again with like not much backup plan?
Yeah, I actually think, and this might be a little bit of an outlier. I do think it might
Because
be
I
guard
agree.
for me if Jalen Moore and Josh Simmons are both healthy. which we don't, Jalen Moore missed some of the OTA time and Simmons is coming back from a serious injury. But if they are both full team participants day one in training camp, then I believe that at least one of those guys is very likely to be an NFL caliber starting left tackle. Maybe not top 10, top 15 day one, but top 30. And that's good enough for me at least to like breathe easy. If Kingsley just, for whatever reason, if he's just not an NFL offensive lineman, I'm not predicting that, but if that happens, if you go, man, he couldn't cut it at tackle, he's not cutting it at guard, what do we do? Now you are essentially like forced to give a promotion to Mike Caliendo or Hunter Norzad. And I think you can, first of all, the Chiefs have actually, as I just named a couple guys off the top there, the Chiefs have some young depth at guard. They have some other guys who I think can compete there, but I don't think you necessarily have somebody who's going to take the job away from Kingsley unless he sort of forces himself to give it up for whatever reason. So I think there's a little bit more, maybe a little more disaster potential at guard, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
but also I think Kingsley's ceiling at guard is amazing. But if you, and now we just talked about this, but if you guaranteed me the best possible outcome, I'd say, oh man, Josh Simmons and Kingsley Suamataia on the left side are not only like an unbelievable couple of athletes side by side, they're going to be weapons
No,
for the remainder
that's why I
of
said
their
the
rookie.
ceiling is like the floor is, I do think, actually lower, but the ceiling is, I mean, the best case scenario is it's one of the best units in the league. Like there is
Right.
that path too. So
But the downside we saw from Kingsley last year was that he got pulled at the end of week 2 and it was over by week 3, and it was a quick decision they made. So we've seen the downside for him. I really truly, man, I hope it works out at guard, not just for the Chiefs, but like he seems like a good dude who
oh yeah,
obviously hates how last year went. Like that's not how anyone wants to be introduced to the league and the next phase of their incredibly high pressure, highly viewed career
yeah, it was
path.
rude,
But
wasn't it? It was a rude introduction. Trey Hendrickson was
Very
Trey
much so.
Hendrickson.
Yes, that was a bit of a baptism. So I hope guard goes better because I think he could be really, really
All
fun
right,
there.
let's switch gears for just a second to the other side of the ball defensively. So, I told Taylor Witt of Always Sunny couple weeks ago when I had him on about a funny. So I did a off-season pod probably about a month ago now with my buddy Kyle, who kind of helped me get this podcast off the ground, and we talked about we did an exercise of like 3 key players for the Chiefs to get back to winning a Super Bowl this year. And we like listed them in ascending order from like 3rd to 1, which obviously, again, like being 3rd still means you're massively important. It's just 3rd to 1. And we kind of did this thing where we like counted down and then said at the same time, because then we could like to debate the nuances of all that. And it was funny because the first guy we listed, so the number 3, we simultaneously, I said Christian Fulton, he said Jalen Watson. So it kind of goes right into this topic because it's like it really doesn't matter which guy you choose. We're clearly in agreement on the spirit of the topic, and we had it pegged at the exact same level. I think Christian Fulton could really be one of the underrated free agents of this whole entire offseason if the Chiefs, get their wings and fly back to the mountain peak again this year, because not so much because of anything he specifically is or does, but just like I'm getting some 2023 vibes from this secondary, like because I think Christian Fulton can be 75-80% of the player L'Jarius Sneed was. We know what Jalen Watson is. And maybe the most important X factor in all of this, again, not really so much how good or specific skills those guys have, but because they are big outside corners who you trust, it allows you to shift Trent McDuffie to his elite position, which is what allowed the Chiefs secondary to be so good in 2023. Are you feeling just as optimistic?
I feel like I'm bringing very little to your show as a guest because, yeah, man, if you wanted somebody to try to bring you down from that line of thinking, I am the wrong guy. I am absolutely in that headspace. And I'm trying recently to try to not just assume that Christian Fulton is going to have a career year because, he came to Kansas City on a very reasonable deal. He's had a fine NFL career, but not necessarily what you expected at the draft and all of that.
Right.
But why would I not assume that the year with Steve Spagnuolo and Dave Merritt in the secondary, why would I not assume that he was going to have the best time of his career under those circumstances? Why would I not assume? And you hit my favorite part of this thing. When the deal came down, I was thrilled with the move because of
It's a
that Trent
chess move.
McDuffie part.
Yeah.
And last year, McDuffie got moved out of his best spot out
Yep.
of necessity. Obviously, Jalen Watson getting hurt was huge, but even with Jalen Watson, it was kind of you're still relying on Joshua Williams or Najee Johnson on the outside, and then ultimately you're relying on both of them quite a bit if they're on the outside. So McDuffie stays outside a ton last year. And you have Shamari Connor playing the slot. I think Shamari Connor is a fun player and a good safety. He's not a good man coverage corner though. At least he
No.
wasn't last year. Which again, I don't think he has to be in that spot. And I Steve Spagnuolo does not make a whole lot of foolish coaching decisions. I wouldn't plant my flag in that one. But it was out of necessity. That's how they shuffled the deck chairs this year with health, and that's not a guarantee for Watson or Fulton or even for McDuffie, but with health, the Chiefs now have two outside corners who you can send out there and let them live in Spags' defense. They can come and lay the wood in the run game. They're not afraid to tackle at any level. And meanwhile, Trent McDuffie goes back to being the best slot coverage player in football, a guy who can blitz out of that spot as good as anybody. And he becomes his most valuable and playing at his highest level, in my opinion, back there in the slot, which 75% of the time, all three of those guys are going to be on the field. And then honestly, if Najee Johnson and Joshua Williams and Noel Williams is in the mix, of course, too. I
Yeah.
don't want to
Yep.
I don't want to rely on the rookie because again, that you get in trouble that way, as we just talked about. But the rest of that room feels great if those are your fourth, fifth, and sixth corners, however that shakes
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
But that 1, 2, 3 for me, McDuffie is the star of the group, and allowing him to go back to where he does his work the best. If the Chiefs get, I mean, if Christian Fulton is just Jalen Watson before his injury last year, I mean, and Jalen Watson before his injury last year was on freaking fire. But
Yeah.
if he's Jalen Watson before his injury last year, this defense is suddenly playing with his hair on fire.
And I think the Trent McDuffie thing is kind of interesting because like I've seen certain, I guess, amounts of pushback that it's like, like I've seen some pushback on that idea, I guess, because it's like, well, how is he like? We think he's like, up there with Sauce Gardner and stuff as one of the best corners in the league, and we're trying to move him into the slot. Like, it seems like I've seen some people saying like, well, wouldn't you rather him be playing on the outside? Because, and I think it's kind of a left tackle, right tackle thing again, where the game has changed because there are like, it used to be that way where like if you couldn't play left tackle, at least you could probably play right tackle. Well, you can't be you got to be a good pass blocker at either position nowadays because there's good edges coming off both sides. And I think there's some of that going on in this discussion here too, because yes, that did used to be true that like the lesser talented receivers got put in the slot, and so that's where you put your third corner. And like I think there's a sort of a misnomer there too now that like third corner and slot corner are the same thing. I just don't think that's how the game works anymore. I mean, I think of guys like Keenan Allen or like Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yes.
Like there are legitimate star receivers at the slot position at this point. So I think it's not I think it's just a matter of if you have a guy who is, elite at one thing and then good at something else, your main job as like Brett Veach is to do whatever needs to be done to allow you to play the guy at his elite spot. I think
Yeah.
it's just that simple.
I think I'm with you across the board there, where you're right. The game has changed. And a lot of people, you grew up watching Revis Island. It wasn't Revis middle of the field. Like you're envisioning.
Yeah, yeah.
I envision that one like all 22 snapshot of literally like Darrelle Revis on his own. Like he's the only defender in the third of the field that he's on. And the other 10 guys are in the middle or the other side of the field. It's an unbelievable picture. Um, I totally understand that. The other thing, I'm just going to add to stuff you said because I think I agree with everything you
Yeah,
said
yeah,
there. The other stuff on top of that is one that like McDuffie has extra value in the slot in Spags' defense as a blitzer, as a rusher there. They
yeah,
don't pull
that
that
too.
lever
Yeah,
frequently, but like it's another thing you have to account for as a defense on every play. On every play, it could be him, it could be somebody else. There's always the possibility for movement, and that's the other thing. Like not only do you have guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is like kind of changing his power slot dynamic and all of that, receivers move around all the time now, and so can DBs. If you want to have Trent
yeah,
McDuffie follow Jamar Chase throughout the game, you can do that. It's going to be in different spots. Um, Ultimately, I think you want to get the best level of performance you can at as many spots on the field as possible, which is why like the old line comparison I think is a good one where they talk about we just want to get our best five. So I didn't mention him in the left guard conversation earlier. I think I probably should. If training camp comes around and Wanye Morris at guard is looking like the best option out there, then you do it.
do it.
This one's not
Yep,
going to happen, but just to make the point, if Jalen Moore at guard is the best option, do it for your best
you
five.
do it.
Again, I do not think that he or Simmons
No,
are
yeah,
moving inside.
no,
That,
yeah,
but that's just the way you've got to live at the NFL level, and I hope there aren't a lot of people, or maybe there's not a lot of people listening right now who genuinely have that like third corner, slot corner thing, because it is a different skill set. And again, it's not the iconic Richard Sherman or Darrell Reeves, these different types of corners who you think of in their length or their physicality or the different ways they won. Watching Trent McDuffie in the slot is a treat. There are a couple of film reviews that the aforementioned Seth Kaiser's put out, where you watch Trent McDuffie in the zone coverage taking away multiple routes over the course of the play. It's mind-boggling how much of a
yeah.
gravitational power he has wherever he's lined up, but especially in the slot, he's just able to do so much. That yeah, I am thrilled for him to be moving back in the slot, and I think he is almost inarguably like a top five corner in football right now. And that's only made more obvious in the slot. He's on the outside 25% of the time anyway, but in the slot, he's
Yeah, I
even more
think
special.
my favorite thing from because I read, I read Steph's film reviews all the time too, and there was one I don't even remember when this was. It could have been multiple years ago now, but uh, it was one where he's just basically laughing in his newsletter because, to your point about like him taking away multiple routes, he's like,
It's amazing.
I think Trent McDuffie ran the receiver's route
Yeah.
better than he did on this play. Like
Yeah.
it's incredible. All right, I want to switch gears to the running back room here for a minute, and you know, I'm kind of uncertain where to go with that because running backs we've there's the age old that's another thing that's changed in the league and the positional value, but then it also like you have the Chiefs element too and how it isn't the feature that it is for even other offenses today. But last year there and really probably for multiple years now, there's been criticism of a lack of juice and speed from the running back room. And, if you wanted to go like real macro here, you could argue that they haven't had a true difference maker at running back since like Kareem Hunt's first go around here.
Yeah.
Because ever since then it was, either somebody like Damian Williams who had some juice but had health issues and just wasn't the same caliber of player. And then ever since he left, it's been kind of the safe guys who offer good high floors but very little ceiling, from Spencer Ware to Darrell Williams to Clyde, which that's probably even being a little generous there, but same exact skill set at least. And then even to like this version of Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco. So I get the excitement around Elijah Mitchell, though his health. I'm not. Don't count on anything from him as my mindset. Like whatever you get from him is a bonus. But uh, then you have Brashard Smith, of course, who brings stuff to the passing game. I get the excitement, and I do think it's a good thing they addressed it. But I kind of wonder if we got a little off kilter because I think some of the frustration, especially the last 2 years, from the running back room and not having that juice, that explosive element, I think that is just something else we locked onto of like, where can we find that juice? Because we
Hmm.
weren't getting it from the passing game. So we were like, okay, somebody else has got to step up. Running backs looking at you. Nope, that ain't happening either. So I almost kind of wonder if because I assume we're operating under the assumption that unless somebody just completely, you know, grabs a job and runs with it, no pun intended, that, you know, we're going to see a lot of the same reps from running back last year. You know, maybe obviously I think Pacheco would probably, you would hope, is the number one back again, and Kareem Hunt is more into kind of a fullback role. But, you know, I think we are going to see a lot of them still, and just sparing reps from the juice guys and Mitchell and Smith. And I think some people, I've seen some frustration on that. And I actually kind of wonder if this Chiefs offense is back to its ways in the passing game, which they certainly seem to have, the with the Rice health and possible not suspension, and, you know, Worthy taking a step forward and Hollywood Brown hopefully being healthy this year. I see the pathway to that. I almost kind of wonder if that ground and pound, power based, steady Eddie, you know, guaranteed to move the chain stuff is exactly what they need. Maybe that's the perfect complement to a good passing unit. And, you know, maybe we were misplacing some of our frustration with the running back juice with the lack of passing juice. So where are you at on this running back room in general, and what do you think about my takes there?
I think the last thing is an interesting observation that if the offense would have had an explosive passing game, you would have been really, really happy to have this like plodding, successful, but not explosive running game. I think there's something to that. And it's funny, a couple of times this week, I've talked about a guy who you mentioned the name of. I think you've got him in the right spot on the depth chart, but I think people have kind of lost the plot on Isaiah Pacheco a little bit. Where you have him going into last year, a lot of Chiefs fans are talking about him like he's a top 10 running back. You look what he's done, and then he gets injured. He's gone for a long time. He comes back off of a very serious injury at less than 100%. You watched Kareem Hunt get 3 yards at a time throughout his season, and then a lot of people
No
are
more,
suddenly,
no
oh,
less.
Isaiah Pacheco
No,
never had
no.
juice. He has
Yeah.
he correct. Yeah, Isaiah Pacheco doesn't have the juice anymore. His vision's not as good as Hunt's, but he's not moving like he used to. I'm out. I'm out. Give me somebody else. And really, I say this a little bit tongue in cheek, but you know, I also believe it. I think I've been right about Isaiah Pacheco the whole time. Like that, he has always been a good running back, and that's useful. I don't think he was ever pushing the top 10 super closely, and I don't think this year is going to change that. But people being out on him because he was coming back at 70% or whatever after shattering his leg, maybe a
Right.
bit dramatic, but a serious, like a femur injury, right? Lower leg and
Yeah.
ankle injury,
Yeah.
super serious injury, comes back less than 100%, understandably. I think a lot of people's memory has betrayed them on going, oh no, I think Pacheco actually like does have a role in this offense as a I would say I think Pacheco for me this year the goal should be to have him be the guy who gets the start in a committee. And that's also like I even think about Jerick McKinnon, who was not a by any means the bell cow of this running back room at any point. But you think about guys having success in specialist roles a little bit, and Brashard Smith is certainly going to be that in a best case scenario. He's a pass catching running back. You're not going to give him a ton of carries. Kareem Hunt, in a best case scenario, you're trying not to give him 25 carries a game. You want to keep his body healthy and let him be a guy who can do some stuff in the short yardage. You mentioned Elijah Mitchell. He's had these injury issues. If he's healthy, you're not going to ride him into the dirt. And then with Pacheco, I think he's the guy who you could see getting, who you should probably see getting the bulk of the carries. And then I think the running back room is okay. I don't think it's a great room. I think it's fine. I think it's better than last year's, and last year's was elevated to some extent with Samaje Perine. I love that move, but he wasn't in St. Joe. He was in camp with the Broncos, and it felt like he never quite got the Jerick McKinnon role that seemed like he was such a good fit for. I think you let it shake out over the course of training camp. You hope guys stay healthy, and I think that the really those four guys, you probably roster all of them, and you just say, hey, we're gonna figure it out with this group. And I think if there's if it's mostly a healthy group, if it's not another nearly season-ending injury for Isaiah Pacheco, I think the group will be okay.
What do you think about the Kareem Hunt in kind of the fullback role? Because I agree, they're going to carry all four of those guys. I mean, honestly, uh, and I would still be shocked by it, but I think the most likely guy to get cut or well, not make the opening day roster, he would be on the practice squad most likely is Smith. I mean, they guaranteed Elijah Mitchell. He's making more money than Pacheco on his rookie deal this year. In fact, he might be making a little more than Kareem Hunt. Like, it's not a lot of money. It's like 3 million, I think. Maybe that's like the max value, but I don't think he's I don't think there's any chance of him like not making the roster. So I think they're all four going to make it, and four is about the outer limit, I think, of how many running backs you want to carry. Like, because I keep seeing Carson Steele gets like, like, well, who gets cut to make room for Carson Steele? Is it Elijah Mitchell and I'm just like, why?
Right.
Like, why do we assume we need a fullback? Especially because, again, I think Kareem Hunt kind of is a fullback at this point in his career.
I'll agree with you on one thing, and just to mix it up for the first time this hour, I'll disagree with you on something, just because it's
Yeah,
nice to
of
find
course.
something every once in a while.
Yeah.
But I think that group of four, I kind of think there's a chance that I might put Hunt and Mitchell on the bottom end of like safety on the roster, because I think there's a chance that either of those guys show up to camp and you go like, oh, okay, well they're just out of gas. Like they just Kareem Hunt came back and had a great season last year, and we're seeing him now, and it's just not there anymore. Thank you for your time. That's the end for you. And with
Sure.
Mitchell, it could be something similar. Oh, you didn't quite get back to the speed we wanted yet. Whatever. I still think it's most likely that all four of them are on the roster. And I think Carson Steele is going straight to the practice squad. They'll be glad to have him there. And if somebody gets hurt in the season, they need to call somebody up. Call him back up, Carson Steele. Easy thing to do. The fullback specific thing is the one thing I'm nitpicking at a little bit, because one issue is that uh, Kareem Hunt isn't going to be out there on special teams, right? And when you think about
True,
like
yeah.
what's the modern fullback, as much of an endangered species as they are, nearing an extinct species, honestly, as endangered as they are, what does that look like? Carson Steele's half of the roster last year was like good pass pro in the preseason, and then what can we have you do on special teams? We're gonna send you flying down the field in this instance, have you back here protecting and being able to have a little bit of flexibility within all of that. Hunt just doesn't have that. So I think if Kareem Hunt makes the team, I think for him, one thing that not a lot of guys on this roster have right now, he can be a short yardage guy, but he can also pass protect. And I don't know that I'm ready to trust the rest of the group that much. Pacheco would be great for him to take a little step up there this year, because I think they really need that still. But if
Yep.
you said, all right, I think Kareem Hunt is short yardage and some pass pro, and he can catch some passes out of the backfield. He's not your traditional third down back in the way you typically think about it, but I think he could do some of that for this team. That's great. The full backiness of it all, I just think is going to end up being, I think it's going to be Noah Gray who's back there and a little offset eye if you're trying to have a little more beef in the backfield.
Yeah, that makes sense because we actually kind of have seen him, and it's like whatever. I still sometimes struggle to understand like where H back even falls on the spectrum of like halfback, fullback,
Yes.
but like so like but yeah, it's essentially, I don't know. Do you have anything to offer there on that? Like, is H back just fullback, but he's lined up differently, or what is all that?
It's all evolved so much over the course of the life of football that it's also something where I've just kind of been like, these semantics might not matter to me in the grand scheme of things, because full back doesn't make any sense in terms of the original like usage of the word, right? Where
Yeah,
he's
there are
going to
no
be versus where
lead
the halfback,
blockers.
right?
That's not a role at least anymore.
Right. And you're doing that with other players in other positions, and you want to have as many like feasible weapons on the field as possible. And so I think that's the advantage of having Noah Gray be your H back, not a halfback, because that's the running back. Like having him be in that kind of do it all, jack of all trades kind of role. And that is, to me, like that. If you're asking for a modern NFL fullback, I'm asking for a guy who can do like 5 things. And I think Noah Gray, it's obviously not his main job by any means, but when you want to pull that lever, I think Gray's probably the guy that gets that look. I wouldn't hate it at all if there was a snap or two where Kareem Hunt and Rashard Smith
Yeah,
are on
like
the
Hunt
field together. Like I
lead
think,
blocks for him.
yeah,
Yeah, I would like that.
I'd love a little heavy package here. Then I think that could be very fun, and it wouldn't. I don't know if we're ever going to see it, and if we see it, we might not see it till January. But it wouldn't surprise
Right.
me if Andy Reid's got a note card somewhere that had multiple backs on the field, even presumably without Carson Steele being the like true quote unquote fullback
Yeah, I
who'd be on
really
the
like that
roster.
because like I've said this to like even my buddies who are kind of like of similar minds to you and me of like, we love the new school analytic style of play, and like who doesn't want to see Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball over the yard and just scoring points on points on points. But I still am like, and maybe it's because my dad is a retired football coach and very much an
Mm-hmm.
old school type, but like as much as I love that and as much as I think that's how you should try to build your offense, I think there's still something to like that's fun and that gets you excited, but there's still very few feelings of like just that savage triumph of like like that kind of that guttural feeling inside you that just like, let's go. Like when you watch your team, like I don't want the Chiefs to play Philadelphia Eagles style of offense.
Right.
But man, like the few times we have seen them just be able to exert their dominance in a run game, like it's a different feeling. But that's just as like powerful feeling as the flinging the ball over the yard when you can just like assert dominance and just like there's nothing they can do to stop you from getting to the spot you want.
I agree wholeheartedly, and from my spot in my office right now, I can see a Tony Richardson card that I put up on
It makes you feel like you could run through that brick wall that they're running through.
Yes, like 100%. I played fullback in high school a little bit, and so I have no expertise, and I wasn't good at it, but I do have a love and an admiration for the position.
All right, last thing here before we wrap up here, talking to Joshua Briscoe of Only Weird Games. You can check out his podcast wherever you get your podcast, joined by Nate Taylor and Seth Kaiser. Maybe we'll have those guys on as well a little later on as we get through the season. Let's talk a little bit about Travis Kelce here, Briscoe, because of course there's no denying that he has physically declined. That certainly stepped up in 2023 when he hurt his knee and missed week 1 last year. I think you could like see it even in the like even me, just who prefers to listen to the radio broadcasts because they're more descriptive. Like even like Mitch Holthus would talk about how like, and Dane Hughes would even acknowledge like there are times he gets up and he's just looks like, oof, like I'm feeling the mileage. But I almost kind of wonder if maybe there isn't one little swan song bounce back left, because I think there is a pretty steep correlation between when the Chiefs receivers became problematic because 22, I feel like some people get this timeline a little messed up, because 2022 was the first year without Tyreek Hill, and yet 2018 is probably still pretty damn hard to top. But there's a case, you could make a case that was the Chiefs' best offensive year. That was Mahomes' second MVP year. That was Isaiah Pacheco's rookie year. Jerick McKinnon was, still had his juice. It was probably Kelsey's second best year after 2020 when he had like 1,416 yards or whatever it was. And then, yes, like again, like I think that it did happen. He did have a sharp physical decline after that because that's how age works. And he had an injury. But of course, 23 is when Kadarius Toney was the focal point of the offense. Sorry for bringing back those memories, guys, but it happened. And then last year, I think they had a really solid plan, and I'm fine with the fact they're basically trying to just say, hey, we still got confidence in that plan. It just was a comical chain reaction of bad things. So I'm fine with the dialing it back. But last year, like I said, it fell apart because of all the injuries on the receiver side of things. So if they, are able to stay healthy, and if Xavier Worthy takes a step forward and Rice is everything he looked like he was going to be last year, I almost kind of wonder if, Kelsey could see a bit of a bounce back because he isn't the focal point of the offense. And that's the other angle of this, is like, while he undoubtedly doesn't have, like, say, the yak ability and certainly just can't run away from guys in coverage the way he used to, like, I think a big part of why his stats have declined is without Rashee Rice on the field last year, and with him still going through his growing pains as a rookie, like, Kelsey has still yet to not be the focal point of the Chiefs offense for any sort of length of time. You think that could actually give him a bit of a bounce back?
Here's what I'll add to that one, because we're on the same page again, unsurprisingly. Last year, Travis Kelce sat in week 18. Reminder for everybody, the Chiefs did not play their starters. He played 16 games. He played 940 offensive snaps last year. That's more than he played in 2023, 22, 21, and 20. He played more snaps in 2018 and 2019. He played fewer snaps every year before that. I could also say at age 35, and I can say this as the 30-year-old who was at the doctor today, at age 35, Travis Kelce played the third most snaps in a single season of his entire career. That is not a recipe for aging gracefully. And it wasn't the Chiefs.
I slept on my shoulder wrong last night, and I was swimming in my pool today, and I was shooting hoops. And every time I would shoot hoops in my pool basketball goal, I'm like, because like I slept wrong on my shoulder, and like it actually feels better now because I made sure to I specifically did that because I was like, dude, the one thing you can't do is like let it sit still, and
Right.
it actually feels better now. But I'll be 30 in December, and I'm just like, why? Why did we do that to this guy?
This is elder abuse. Maybe that's an exaggeration. It's definitely an
Yeah, yeah,
exaggeration. This man is in unbelievable shape. But yeah, that is
yeah.
not a recipe for aging gracefully. You would not recommend that to anybody else. No, I think there's absolutely something to this. And I'll kind of think about this and simmer on it as long as you need to. But I asked Seth and Nate, and I've asked a few other people about this. Say, hey, we all, I think, believe that Rashee Rice is going to be the number one option in the passing game this year for the Chiefs. 2, 3, and 4 in some order is Xavier Worthy, Travis Kelce, and Hollywood Brown.
Right.
What order do you want to put them in? For me, I actually think I said it there in the order that it should be in, where I think you look for Worthy to build
Kelsey
on a
too.
very successful year.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
putting
oh yeah,
Worthy at
that's right.
2
Right.
right now. I'm not staking that claim super confidently, but I think in a best case scenario, it's Worthy 2, Kelsey 3, Hollywood 4. And if Travis Kelce is your third pass catching option in an offense, life is good. If he is your virtually only consistent pass catching option on offense, your life is very, very difficult as a team that wants to score points. So I really am also there with you where I think physically he might look a little more like he has in the couple years prior, where you're just putting a little bit less on his shoulders. There's more going on in the offense. Defenses don't have to exclusively key in on him, and they just losing Rice and Hollywood as early as they did last year. They just had to immediately pivot, and it was I think last year's offense was essentially, hey Trav, sorry to ask you to do this again,
We actually need you to
but
play
we're
more
gonna need you to
snaps than you ever have since your 20s at 35.
right.
Like,
Yeah. And again, the Chiefs were in a corner there because it was either build the offense around Travis Kelce or like no shade, but like Juju Smith-Schuster and Justin Watson. It was like, well, we're gonna go to the future Hall of Famer, best tight end of all time. Like we're gonna go ahead and go to him. But the wear and tear on Kelce last year was, I think, more than anyone should have expected him to give. He gave a ton. The offense was functional. I think this year the offense should hopefully just be fun.
yeah. Last thing here. What do you think? What is if it is a bounce back? What does that look like? Because I think I can't remember who this one was with. I try to always credit, but I can't remember. Somebody had said when I had talked about this, um, when we went down this alley, that like maybe because I kind of asked the question to them of, does it look like a bounce back to like 2022 and like those types of years, like where he's getting, like well over 1,000 yards and is a high volume guy, or like what does it look like? And whoever it was made a really good point that like maybe we don't quantify it in terms of regular season numbers, but
Mhm.
maybe we all had this hope last year that like we could tell that he wasn't the same player he'd always been. But we're like, but man, everybody's got that extra gear they hit in the playoffs. And then he actually did it in the first playoff game. If you remember last year, I think he had like what, 7 for over 100 and a touchdown.
And he did
Um,
it to a
and,
tremendous extent
right,
the
right.
year prior.
And but then it kind of tapered off in the Super Bowl, and he wasn't able to kind of play hero ball. So whoever that was, they kind of made a really good point that it's like maybe we don't quantify a bounce back in terms of regular season stats, but maybe he actually is able to like turn back the clock one more time for 3 games this year. What do you think a bounce back, if it does happen and the offense is clicking, what does it look like?
I think Kelsey could have a tremendous year with 750 yards, which would be a career low, except for his rookie season. He got hurt right away. He could have 750 yards on 100 targets and 80, 65,
80,
70
yeah.
catches, 80. Yeah, like, and 7 or 8 touchdowns. And it could be tremendous. That's because he's the third option in the offense. If
Right.
Rashee Rice goes for 1,200 and let's say Rashee Rice goes for, no, I'm not gonna get it. I'm not gonna exaggerate. Let's say Rashee Rice goes for 1,200. Xavier Worthy goes for 900. Hollywood goes for 750. Like I'm kind of even like pushing some of those numbers down from where I hope they end up. But if you get there, suddenly that not only do you not need Travis Kelce to do as much all the time. The numbers just aren't all, the volume isn't going to be there. And that's a great thing if your issue with Travis Kelce is like, we want to not put so much volume on you. So I think he could have, it's a little bit, I don't know that I have necessarily like the correct stat line for you. I think the playoff point is a very good one. But I think if you have him feeling good in the playoffs and playing 15, 16 games in the regular season being your third pass catching option most of the time. And that'll change from week to week. Like you're gonna have game plans where it's the Travis Kelce game. And maybe that's my real answer for you, honestly, is that you will have some games where maybe having Travis Kelce in fantasy next year isn't as much fun as it has been in years prior. But maybe you have a game where it's 8 catches for let's say 10 catches for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Travis Kelce looks like Travis Kelce. And then the next week, it's not that Travis Kelce isn't looking like himself; it's that the game plan is Rashee Rice just eating the defense alive in the intermediate. Maybe the next week it's Xavier Worthy deep shots and a little bit of Hollywood is what keeps the offense running, and some variety and all of that. There will be ebbs and flows in Kelsey's season, but I think the quote bounce back version of that is that the ebbs and flows are a good positive symptom of a healthier offense.
Love it. That's Joshua Briscoe of Only Word Games and Kansas City Sports Network. Briscoe, great stuff, man. Let's talk again once training camp rolls around.
It's going to be here sooner than we think. I enjoy chatting with you as always. Thanks for having me. I'm going to go try to rest my 30-year-old
Sounds
bones.
good. Me too, man. It's Joshua Briscoe on the Calling It How You See It Sports Podcast.